especially last year, because I talked about the physicality of the league.
Yeah.
And so when games are that physical and they can get that chip, what does it mean? What is it like to have Sophie Cunningham on your?
The physicality of this league has been a constant talking point, especially after last season, when nearly every night turned into a test of toughness. And in games like that, things can get real physical, real fast. But then comes the real question. What does it actually look like when you have someone like Sophie Cunningham on your side? Caitlin Clark saw it firsthand. Watching Cunningham go to work against the New York Liberty, she had a reaction that every Fever fan is going to understand. We'll come back to that in a second, because first we need to talk about what actually happened on that floor. Indiana didn't just show up for a preseason game against a team many people are already labeling the 2026 Wnba favorites. They controlled it from start to finish, and right in the middle of it was Sophie Cunningham. Coming off a season-ending MCL injury, she looked like she never lost her edge, dropping 14 points in just 13 minutes of action. 13 minutes! That's all it took for her to make a massive impact. Indiana didn't ease into this win. They ran, they pushed pace, set the tone early, and never let New York settle into anything comfortable. It was a statement performance. And if you're excited about seeing Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham back together on the floor, drop a comment below. CC and Sophie.
USA basketball was your excitement that's first W game for you, ambition, and you spent 9 months.
Super excited. I think like coming in here, obviously this isn't a real game, I understand that, but that's how we treat it, like a real game. So I think anytime you get to put on your uniform and lace up your shoes, like you don't take that for granted, especially having come off of last year, and I didn't really get to do that very much. So I think for me coming into this game, just a lot of excitement.
When Caitlin Clark stepped back onto the floor, it had been a long road just to get to that moment. Her last real game action came all the way back on July 15th, 2025. And in basketball terms, that's an eternity. The 2025 season didn't just slow her down, it unraveled piece by piece. First the quad, then the thigh, then the groin, then the ankle. One setback after another, stacking until her year was reduced to just 13 games total. So when she walked into this preseason matchup against New York, the nerves weren't just on the outside, they were everywhere. And the real question wasn't about the scoreboard. It was something much more basic. Could she still move like herself? Before the game, Clark was honest. She said she was genuinely excited to be back in rhythm, but she also admitted there were nerves there too. And that makes perfect sense when you think about what her body has put her through over the past year. Because it's not just physical recovery, it's mental recovery too. Relearning trust in her first step, trust in her plant foot, trust in that split-second change of direction that defines her entire game. The version of Caitlin Clark that Indiana needs isn't just healthy on paper, it's a version that moves without hesitation, a player who isn't second-guessing her body every time she accelerates, cuts, or pulls up into a shot. And that's what everyone was really watching for in that moment, not just how she played, but how she felt playing again.
Not a ton of nerves, just like get out there, run around. It's going to be probably a little sloppy here and there for both teams. That's kind of what preseason games are about. You give everybody some run, you figure out what lineups work, what don't, and everybody's just trying to get their footing again, and same goes for me too. So I think obviously can rely on the USA basketball stuff that I did and that experience of getting back out there and my body feeling good, and bring that into today for sure.
She ended the night shooting 2 for 10 in 17 minutes. And on the surface, that stat line doesn't look pretty at all. But numbers alone don't tell the real story here, because the moment that actually mattered came early. Running a simple action off a screen from Monique Billings, Caitlin Clark slipped into the paint, read the defense in real time, and softly guided a floater off the glass for the opening basket of the game. Nothing flashy, nothing over the top, just instincts, touch, and timing. The same kind of finish fans remember from before everything slowed down in 2025. And in that moment, after months of uncertainty, that single bucket felt bigger than a stat line. It felt like reassurance, like a small answer to a question everyone had been holding on to for too long. Then came the next moment. She stepped into a three-pointer, quick release, no hesitation, clean swish, no overthinking her body, no visible hesitation about the knee, the ankle, or anything she had been battling through. And that's when the tone around her shifted completely. What does she look like? Turned into she's actually back. Indiana erupted for 32 points in the first quarter, and Clark's early shot making set the rhythm for everything that followed. Not dominance on the box score, but something more important at this stage. Proof of rhythm returning.
You mentioned Monique Billings.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just curious, when you spent time with her at USA Basketball, before she even came into the fold here, how much did you think, this could be an interesting pairing.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a previous relationship with Mo before USA Basketball, and then getting to play with her was really, really fun. Obviously, an athletic big that runs the floor well, has great hands, is very active defensively. Like, those are the type of post players that I love playing with, and I thought we kind of created a little bit of a bond, and more than anything, like, she's a tremendous person as well, and those are the type of people that we want to bring into our locker room. She's a good soul. She puts the team before herself.
One of the more intriguing things in those 17 minutes was the growing chemistry between Caitlin Clark and Monique Billings in transition. It didn't look accidental. It looked familiar. The two of them had already spent time together through USA Basketball, where Billings was one of the biggest beneficiaries of Clark's playmaking, finishing at a high rate off her passes. That connection showed up again here. The moment Indiana secured possession, Clark was already scanning ahead, and Billings was already moving into the exact pockets of space she knew would open up. Before the defense could even fully organize, the play was already in motion. Clark pushed the tempo immediately, and Billings turned that pace into production, finishing with 9 points on actions that all started the same way. Clark getting the ball and instantly turning it into a fast break opportunity. It wasn't just running the floor, it was anticipation on both ends. Clark seeing the court a step ahead, and Billings reading it right alongside her.
Continued to grow, and we're seeing it right there.
Beautiful touch.
Billings down low, nice pass, and was able to complete it and finish.
And you can.
After the game, Caitlin Clark was clear about what she wants this offense to look like moving forward. For her, the goal is simple: play fast, push in transition, and avoid standing still in half-court sets. Because when the ball slows down, defenses get exactly what they want: time to settle, switch matchups, and take control of possessions. That's never been her style. Clark thrives when the game is moving at full speed, when she's healthy, reading ahead of the defense, and making decisions before defenders even have time to plant their feet. That's when Indiana's offense looks at its best: fluid, aggressive, constantly in motion. After the game, she also made it clear that physically she felt good, fast even, and emphasized that it was a completely different feeling compared to much of last season, when her body never quite allowed her to play at that pace. And for Indiana, that distinction matters more than anything else, because when Clark feels fast again, the entire system starts to look like itself.
In free agency, like, we reached out, mostly our front office, they did a lot of that work, and she was really excited about the opportunity. It kind of just worked out perfectly, and we were able to sign her. So really thankful that she wanted to be a part of our team, and I think she is a really perfect fit for us.
An MCL tear isn't something you shake off with a little tape and a quick return to the floor. It's surgery, followed by months of rehab where you're essentially learning to trust your own knee again, then even more time just fighting to get medically cleared to practice with your teammates. For Sophie Cunningham, that clearance didn't come until January 2026. She spent most of the 2025 season watching from the sidelines after appearing in 30 games and starting 13 before the injury shut everything down. So when she finally stepped back onto the court for this preseason matchup against the New York Liberty, the team many are already labeling the 2026 championship favorite, the meaning of the moment hit differently for her. While everyone else was treating it like another preseason test, Cunningham was playing a completely different game. She wasn't just trying to win, she was trying to prove something to herself.
Your shoulders, your arms, your muscles, and she was like, thank you, girl. I've been working on it.
Cunningham puts it in again, her third three-pointer on the...
Not just that her knee could handle the workload, but that her shot was still intact, that she could absorb contact without hesitation, and that she could still be the version of herself Indiana was counting on when it actually mattered. And she answered all of those questions almost immediately. In just 13 minutes, she put up 14 points. But the way she got there is what really stands out. This wasn't a slow grind in the paint or a trip-heavy night at the free throw line. She knocked down 3 shots from beyond the arc, which tells you everything. You don't do that unless you're catching, squaring up, and firing with complete trust in a knee that only recently went through surgery. That's not just production, that's confidence returning in real time.
Training camp yesterday, first thing I look, I'm like, girl, your back, your shoulders, your arms, your muscles, and she was like, thank you, girl, I've been working on it.
Cunningham puts it in again, her third three-pointer on the night. But for Nigelani Hamilton, I mean, I felt a little insecure. I looked at my back yesterday, and I need to get rid of these rolls.
She's motivating all of us.
Yeah.
It's just said that, you know, on her year off, she just had time to really work on her conditioning, fine-tune the details. But how about Sophie Cunningham?
Every three-pointer she buried widened Indiana's lead a little more and sent a clear message to the Liberty defense. There was no space to relax off her. She wasn't giving them even a split second of hesitation. No extra pause, no double clutch, no sign in her movement that suggested she was still easing back into form. Nothing about her body language hinted at recovery mode or uncertainty. She just rose up and shot it like it was business as usual, like it was any other night on the floor.
In a fever. Cunningham comes up with the steal, the bounce pass to Raven Johnson. Cunningham puts it in. That was too easy.
On the defensive end, she matched that same edge, jumping passing lanes, finishing with 2 steals, contesting shots at the rim, and throwing hard screens for Clark that actually shifted defenders out of position. That level of physical presence isn't something you casually display after an MCL tear unless you fully stop second-guessing your knee. And Cunningham made it clear she wasn't second-guessing anything the moment she stepped on the court. Indiana was already shorthanded, with Aaliyah Boston and Lexi Hull both sitting out for precautionary reasons. So every minute Cunningham played wasn't just extra run, it was necessary rotation time. She turned those minutes into production, 14 points, 2 steals, and a defensive energy that noticeably raised the game's tempo. Once she entered, Indiana's rotations tightened up. The pressure on New York's ball handlers intensified, and suddenly, the Liberty started coughing up mistakes they weren't making early in the game.
I think the thing I appreciate about Sophie more than anything is like she's never intimidated of the moment. Like she rises to the occasion every single time. You know, she's gonna have her teammates back. She loves when, you know, when our backs are against the wall, she's going to be one that has the loudest voice, and she's going to be out there fighting and scrapping, and no matter what situation it is.
Clark saw it all unfold, sometimes from the bench, sometimes right there on the floor alongside her. And after the game, she didn't hold back when talking about what Cunningham adds to this group. In her words, Cunningham shows up when the moment gets heavy. She's one of the most vocal competitors out there, the kind of player who fights, scrapes, and sets the tone when the pressure starts to rise. Clark didn't water it down or add any hesitation. Every team in this league would want someone like that, she told reporters. I'm just glad she's on our side.
On 20, we're up 20, it's the same Sophie, and you know, every single team in this league would probably kill to have a player like that. So really fortunate that she's on our side, and you know, Sophie's just a really cool person. Like she's a good soul, but when she steps on the floor, like she's fierce, she's fiery, and she's gonna do anything to help our team win. So I really appreciate that about her.
The New York Liberty entered this matchup already being talked about as the 2026 WNBA title favorite, while Indiana showed up missing Aaliyah Boston and Lexi Hull. Both held out purely as a precaution. So naturally, the expectation was either a smooth Liberty win or, at best, a competitive game that didn't really change anyone's opinion. Instead, what unfolded was 40 straight minutes of Indiana playing at full speed. And that's not just a way of speaking, it's exactly how the game looked from start to finish.
To Mitchell, fires, connects on the 3. Clark takes the 3 and drills it.
Oh my!
Swatted from Raven Johnson. She's a beast on the defensive end. Walker Kimbrough. Flash.
I like that!
New York finished the night with 24 turnovers, and Indiana turned those mistakes into 29 points. Every time the Liberty got careless with the basketball, the Fever were already gone the other direction, pushing in transition before New York's defense even had a chance to organize itself. That's not just a handful of bad possessions or isolated lapses. That's a consistent pattern Indiana forced into existence through relentless pressure, applied from the opening tip all the way through the final whistle.
Big body!
Cunningham puts it in. That was too easy. Timmons creates space and drills it. It's into the 3. Yes, ma'am. The Fever are hot.
Raven Johnson deserves real credit for how much she helped fuel that wave of turnovers, because her box score almost looks like a typo at first glance. In just around 17 minutes of action, she finished with 6 points, 8 assists, 2 steals, and 3 blocks. On paper, that kind of stat line feels almost unreal for that short of a stint, but when you actually watch the tape, it all lines up perfectly. Her impact shows up everywhere the game shifts.
The seas part, but swatted from Raven Johnson. She's a beast on the defensive end. Walker Kimbrough, splash.
She stayed on top of every Liberty Ball handler she could find, never giving them easy space to operate. Instead of backing off, she sat in passing lanes, reading the floor early and getting a step ahead of New York's actions before they even developed. That kind of disruptive point guard defense is exactly what can turn a polished offense into a string of turnovers. And while the 8 assists stand out on the stat sheet, they almost feel secondary compared to how constantly involved she was off the ball. Always moving, always anticipating, always impacting the play.
That's 4 assists on the night so far, now trying to get a little bit of her own, but swatted by Johnson. Johnson, strong move inside and lays it.
Indiana finished with a 20-10 advantage in fast break points, but that gap didn't come from one explosive stretch in the second quarter or a single momentum swing. It was built piece by piece over the full 40 minutes. Every loose ball, every rebound, every intercepted pass turned into immediate transition the other way. The Fever treated each opportunity like a sprint, and they never let up. As the game went on, New York simply couldn't stay synced with that level of pace. Their rotation started arriving late, then not at all. By the second half, players who usually operate comfortably inside their sets were getting caught mid.
Embrace the new pieces, stayed together, and they were connected. And they get that one to fall right.
Action, looking around for answers, only to realize Indiana was already scoring on the other end. Now look at the scoring output, because Indiana had 5 different players finish in double figures against a team widely viewed as one of the deepest rosters in the league. Kelsey Mitchell put up 18 points, and so did Chastity Walker Kimbrough, giving Indiana a pair of co-leaders at the top of the box score. And that's before even getting to Sophie Cunningham's 14, Michaela Timpson's 11, and Caitlin Clark's production in limited 17-minute action. 2 players tied at 18 each against the projected 2026 championship favorite, all while missing 2 starters and still working through a preseason rotation. That's not just balanced scoring, that's offensive production coming from multiple layers, all at once, from different spots on the floor.
The storyline, too, of absolutely torching, no pun intended, the Liberty in the playoffs last year. I'm sorry, but had a phenomenal game, got the hot hand. I thought last season she really elevated her game.
In the lane, tough lay, gets it to fall. And 1.
Michaela Timpson's 11 points came exactly where Indiana needed them most. Around the rim, inside the paint, holding her position, and finishing through contact with Aaliyah Boston still in street clothes. That kind of consistent interior production is important for how this team starts to shape its identity.
Because working with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson for so long, got to be cooking up some plays for sure, just learning under Coach Kirk.
There's a lot of similarities between the 2, and the 3 from Timmons dials it.
And with Boston expected back later in the season, Timpson's growth as a reliable scoring option down low gives head coach Stephanie White real flexibility in how she structures her front court rotations. Justine Patad chipped in 8 points, but her impact went beyond the box score because she consistently dragged her defender out to the perimeter. That might sound minor on the surface, until you realize what it does to a defense trying to pack the paint against Clark and Cunningham. At 6 feet 4 inches with legitimate shooting range, Patad can't just be ignored on the outside. Leaving her open to help elsewhere isn't a viable option, and that single adjustment forces New York into constant rotations and tough coverage choices that open something up on nearly every possession. That's not just a situational advantage, that's a genuine spacing threat that changes how the floor has to be defended.
Versatility to the game.
16 points on the night, and book it. For the Fever, knocks it down.
As the second half wore on, New York's bench rotation looked noticeably stretched thin, while Indiana kept the pressure and pace turned all the way up. The 109-91 final score actually tells the story of what was happening on the floor, an 18-point margin that felt even wider in the closing stretch. The Liberty starters couldn't slow Indiana's momentum, and once the bench units came in, the gap only grew as the Fever maintained their intensity deep into the rotation. Sure, it's still a preseason game, but a performance this complete against this level of opponent without Aaliyah Boston and Lexi Hull stands out. Indiana played its pace and pressure style for all 40 minutes without ever really letting up. That's not just a win, that's a team with a clear identity executing it at full speed. And they did it with a bench that just showed it can go toe-to-toe with one of the most talented rosters in the league.
Stack the day, stack the day, stack the day. Oh, so good to be back. Oh my god. First up of the season!
I was gonna do it, but I'm not gonna. Fever dub.
Chat preseason dubs. I'm dubs.
Yeah, you can usually dismiss a preseason win, and most of the time that's fair, but this wasn't just any win. Indiana beat a genuinely loaded Liberty roster, did it without Aaliyah Boston and Lexi Hull, and did it while running a version of their system that we haven't fully seen from this group yet. That makes it a result that's hard to just brush aside. This entire 2026 Fever roster is built around one idea: Caitlin Clark healthy, playing fast, and everyone else matching that tempo. And this game was one of the first real signs that the offseason work is starting to show. Clark looks like her body is cooperating again instead of holding her back, and the pieces around her look ready to run with her. She finished 2 for 10 in 17 minutes, which by any standard isn't efficient, and yet Indiana still won by 18 points. That's the part that matters. It shows the depth is real, and more importantly, the system doesn't collapse when she's not carrying the scoring load. That's probably the biggest takeaway from the whole night.
I think sometimes it's taken a little bit out of context, like the off-ball stuff, and you know, like, we want to play in transition and we want to play with a lot of pace. We want to outlet to near guard, you know. If that's not me, I need to get down the court and you know, that allows people to come screen for me and get me open. It also makes the other team get cross-matched. You know, they're not able to find their matchups. They want to get matched, especially with me and Kelsey. Like, that presents 2 tough matchup opportunities, and the more I just stand around and wait for the ball, that allows them to get the matchup set that they want. So, yeah, I mean, it puts me off the ball a little bit, especially in dead ball situations. And, you know, I think patience and waiting for screens.
Just look at what Indiana had on the floor and how it all fit together. Raven Johnson anchoring the point of attack and piling up 8 assists. Michaela Timpson working inside for 11 points in the paint. Justine Pat stretching the defense with her 6'4" frame and forcing help all the way out to the perimeter. Kelsey Mitchell and Chastity Walker Kimbrough both pouring in 18 points from different areas on the floor. Monique Billings sprinting the lanes in transition right alongside Clark. New York never found a clear weak point to attack because there wasn't one, and that's saying something, considering the Liberty are usually one of the most efficient teams in the league at exploiting mismatches. On top of that, Aaliyah Boston and Lexi Hull didn't even play. Both held out for precautionary reasons, Boston with a lower leg issue and Hull dealing with a hamstring concern. And even without them, Indiana still hung 109 points on a group many already view as the 2026 title favorite. So what took the floor and overwhelmed New York wasn't even the full version of this roster. That's the part that should grab attention. The fact that there's still another level this team hasn't even shown yet. And that gap between what we saw and what's still coming is exactly why Indiana has to be taken seriously as a contender. Because when this group is clicking, it's not just fast, it's relentless.
It is tiring. It's hard, you know, dribbling the ball at 94 feet. Like, you know, that's exhausting, and that's why we're going to do it to the other team. We're going to pick up full, we're going to guard. That's not fun for the other team's primary ball handler either. So you're going to see a good variation of both, but I mean, like, I'm going to be the primary ball handler. That's never going to change.
Caitlin Clark being in the MVP conversation has been there since her rookie year, but a healthy Clark surrounded by this kind of supporting cast changes the entire picture. With Sophie Cunningham back and knocking down threes, Aaliyah Boston returning to control the paint, Raven Johnson disrupting everything defensively, and Justine Pat adding another shooter defenses can't afford to leave open. This starts to look like a roster built to challenge anyone, not just on isolated nights, but consistently. New York will still sit at the top of most preseason predictions, and that's not really surprising. If anything, it might actually suit Indiana just fine. Historically, this is a group that plays better when the expectations emotions are on the other side. When there's doubt, when they're overlooked, when they're the ones expected to chase rather than lead, they tend to ramp up their intensity and sustain that edge longer. So a Liberty team already being labeled the 2026 favorite before the regular season even begins might end up dealing with something more dangerous than talent alone, a genuine motivation imbalance. And that's the kind of thing that can shift everything once the playoffs arrive.
We understood adversity and what it takes to get there, and also, I think people forget, like, AB didn't play in the, overtime, and Kelsey didn't play in overtime of Game 5 trying to get to the finals. So I think we all have a belief of, like, we can be there, we can get there. We know that there's going to be highs, we know there's going to be lows. I think, especially me going into my 3rd year, I think that's probably like my first 2 years of my career is like everything feels like it's really, really good or it's really, really bad. And that's just kind of how pro basketball works, whether it's on the men's side, whether it's on the women's side. You kind of just got to stay right in the
Cunningham's return plugs a gap that no one else on this roster really fills the same way. She spaces the floor with her shooting, brings real physicality on defense, throws hard, disciplined screens, and competes with full intensity when the game actually tightens up. The moment she checked into this matchup, Indiana's energy noticeably jumped, while New York's margin for mistakes started shrinking almost immediately. That's not the type of player you casually rotate in and overlook. 14 points in 13 minutes against a team many already project as the 2026 championship favorite says plenty on its own, and all of it came in Caitlin Clark's first real game back from her MCL tear, with Clark watching closely from just a few feet away. After the final whistle, Clark was asked about Cunningham, and she didn't hesitate or soften her response. Every team in this league would want someone like that, she told reporters. I'm really glad she's on our side. That's not a scripted answer. That's an honest reaction after watching Cunningham put up 14 points in 13 minutes against a title favorite. As Indiana heads into the regular season, the picture is getting clearer. Clark back and healthy, Cunningham returning with no signs the injury slowed her down, Boston and Hull rejoining the rotation, and a bench that already proved it can handle New York without them. If you're excited to see Clark and Cunningham together, drop CC and Sophie in the comments. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown, and click the video on screen. We'll see you in the next one.